Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're looking beyond just habitat changes. We're really getting into the mechanics, the physiology of how fish are coping or maybe failing to cope with warming waters.
That's right. We're focusing on a really important review paper today. It's titled, What Do Warming Waters Mean for Fish Physiology and Fisheries? The lead author is Alexander G. Little, and it's from 2020. It really lays the groundwork for understanding vulnerability.
And our goal here, is to connect the dots. How does a seemingly small change in water temperature ripple upwards from like the cellular level all the way to impacting global fisheries? We want to understand that mechanistic link.
Exactly. And the paper starts right at the foundation, temperature itself. It's a state variable, fundamentally controlling the energy that drives, well, all chemical reactions in an organism.
And for fish, because most are cold-blooded, their internal temperature is basically the water temperature.
Yeah, almost entirely. There are very few exceptions. So even small water temperature shifts, they have immediate and pretty significant effects on everything from growth, muscle function, heart rate, you name it.
So it's not just like turning up the speed dial slightly, it's more fundamental. It's messing with the whole energy balance.
That's a great way to put it. It throws the whole biological budget out of whack. The key concept the paper highlights is metabolic scope.
Okay, metabolic scope. Let's unpack that.
Think of it like this. Every fish has a baseline energy cost just for staying alive. That's its resting metabolic rate. Then it has a maximum rate at which it can produce energy.
Right, like its total energy income.
Precisely. And the metabolic scope is the difference between that maximum and the resting cost. It's the energy left over for everything else, moving, growing, reproducing.
Ah, so it's the discretionary energy budget.
Exactly. Now, here's the problem with warming. The resting metabolic rate, that basic cost of living, it often shoots up faster than the maximum rate can increase.
So the bills go up faster than the income.
You got it. That difference, the metabolic scope, shrinks. There's less energy available for those crucial activities, and when that scope gets too small or disappears entirely, that's when you start seeing real impacts like population declines.
Okay, that paints a pretty bleak picture. But fish aren't just sitting ducks, are they? The paper talks about their ability to adjust plasticity.
Yes, phenotypic plasticity. This is the fish's toolbox for trying to compensate, to sort of re-regulate their internal systems when faced with persistent temperature changes. It's like their internal thermostat trying to adapt.
And how does that work? Are there different ways they do this?
Yeah, the paper outlines three main types operating on different time scales. First, there's reversible acclimation. This is short-term, maybe weeks, like adjusting to seasons. It can allow fish to maintain fairly constant physiological rates, even across, say, a 10 degrees C difference.
Okay, like getting used to summer versus winter.
Kind of. Then there's developmental plasticity. This is fascinating. The temperature experienced very early in life, during embryonic development, can actually permanently alter how that fish performs thermally later on.
Wow, so early life conditions set a sort of thermal blueprint.
It seems so. And third, there's transgenerational plasticity. This suggests that the thermal environment experienced by parents, or even grandparents the paper mentions, at least 3 generations, can influence how the offspring respond to temperature.
A kind of inherited thermal resilience.
Potentially, yes. And this is big, but this capacity for plasticity isn't universal. It varies hugely between species and even populations.
And some are more vulnerable than others?
Definitely.
Yeah.
The paper points out that tropical fish, for instance, often live very close to their upper thermal limits already. They might have very little room to acclimate further upwards.
Right, they're already on the edge.
Exactly. And even in fish adapted to colder water, acclimation isn't always enough. There's a stark example with Arctic cod. Even after they were acclimated to warmer water, their cardiovascular performance dropped. They struggled to recover after swimming hard.
So even when they try to adjust using this plasticity, the system can still fail under stress.
It can, which is why just knowing a species can acclimate isn't enough for fisheries management. We need to know how well it acclimates and under what conditions to really predict how vulnerable a stock might be to future warming.
Okay, so if plasticity isn't a perfect shield, let's go deeper into the engine room. You mentioned the energy budget. The paper gets into mitochondria, right? This seemed really critical.
Absolutely central. Mitochondria are where the energy currency ATP is actually produced. They use oxygen to break down food substrates. Simple enough, right?
Seems so. Warmer means faster reactions, so they just work faster.
They do work faster, yes.
Yeah.
Substrate oxidation increases, so they need more food, more oxygen. That makes sense. But here's the catch, the really interesting part. Mitochondrial efficiency.
efficiency. How can they be inefficient?
Well, during the process of making ATP, protons are pumped across the membrane. Ideally, they flow back through a specific channel, driving ATP synthesis. But some protons can actually leak back across the membrane without making ATP.
Ah, so it's like wasted effort, leaked energy.
Precisely. It's called proton leak. And the crucial finding is that as temperature rises, this proton leak often increases disproportionately compared to the rate of ATP synthesis.
Wait, so the engine is running faster, needing more fuel, but it's also becoming less efficient at the same time. It's wasting more of that fuel.
That's exactly it. The overall efficiency drops. This means the fish needs to burn through even more food and consume even more oxygen just to produce the same amount of useful energy, ATP. It needs to meet its basic demands.
That sounds incredibly costly. The paper called it an increased cost of growth.
Yes, it means less actual biomass, less growth for every unit of food consumed. This has huge implications for how energy flows up the food chain. You eat more, but grow less.
And this inefficiency affects movement too.
It can. The paper mentions that warming might cause a shift in muscle types towards more fast-twitch fibers. These are powerful, but they fatigue quickly, and they're energetically more expensive to use and maintain. So bursts of speed might cost more energy and be harder to sustain.
Okay, so the mitochondria are struggling with efficiency, demanding more fuel and oxygen. That must put a massive strain on the delivery system, the heart and circulation.
Huge strain. The cardiovascular system is responsible for getting that vital oxygen from the gills to the tissues, including the mitochondria.
So how does the heart respond to warming? Does it just beat faster and faster?
Initially, yes. With acute warming, heart rate increases to try and boost oxygen delivery. But here's another fascinating adaptation. During longer-term warm acclimation, fish often actively downregulate that initially high heart rate.
They slow their heart down. Why would they do that when the demand is higher?
It seems counterintuitive, right? But it might be a protective measure. The heart muscle itself needs oxygen. As the body's overall demand goes up, the blood returning to the heart has less oxygen left in it. If the heart beats too fast for too long under those conditions, it might actually damage itself from lack of oxygen.
Ah, so slowing down is a way to conserve oxygen for the heart muscle itself, even if it limits overall delivery.
That seems to be the thinking. But the consequence is reduced cardiac scope. Similar to metabolic scope, it's the difference between the maximum cardiac output and the resting cardiac output. If the resting demand goes up significantly, there's less capacity left for activity.
And we see this playing out in the real world.
Yes, the paper mentions sockeye salmon as a key example. Increasing temperatures are linked to decreased cardiac scope, which is predicted to make their difficult upstream migrations even harder, potentially impossible for some.
This sounds a lot like that theory, the OCLTT, oxygen and capacity limited thermal tolerance. The idea that fish basically suffocate as it gets warmer.
That's the one. OCLTT posits exactly that. Rising temperatures increase oxygen demand, while simultaneously constraining the cardiovascular system's ability to supply it, leading inevitably to problems.
It sounds like a universal biological law for fish in warming water.
And it was often presented that way. But the paper urges caution here. While OCLTT is a powerful concept, empirical results show that oxygen limitation isn't always the single bottleneck for all species in all conditions.
Really? So it's not the full story?
It seems not universally, no. The ability to acclimate, maybe by reducing resting demand, or maybe by relying more on those less efficient but still functional mitochondrial pathways. It means the picture is more complex. OCLTT should be seen as a really important, testable hypothesis, not necessarily the final word on thermal limits for every fish. The energy debt might be just as critical as oxygen supply.
Okay, interesting nuance there. So if it's not just about oxygen delivery, how does the fish even register the heat signal in the first place? We need to look at the sensors, the molecular pathways.
Right. How is the signal detected and processed? The paper points to specialized cellular sensors, primarily transient receptor potential ion channels, or TRPs. Think of them as tiny thermometers embedded in the membranes of cells, especially in peripheral tissues.
And these TRPs send signals where? To the brain.
Primarily, yes. They relay thermal information to a specific part of the brain, the preoptic area, POA, of the hypothalamus, which acts as a central processing unit for temperature regulation.
But you mentioned developmental plasticity happening really early, maybe before the brain's fully hooked up.
Good point. That suggests there are also local, perhaps cell-autonomous ways for tissues to sense and respond to temperature directly without necessarily waiting for instructions from the brain.
Okay, so there are sensors. What about the switches? How does the cell actually change its operations in response?
The paper highlights a couple of key molecular systems. First, nuclear receptors. These are proteins like TRs, thyroid hormone receptors, and GRs, glucocorticoid receptors. They're clever because they can bind to specific small molecules and directly regulate which genes get turned on or off.
So they act like signal receivers and gene controllers in one package.
Exactly. Thyroid hormone, for example, uses TRs to fine-tune metabolic processes and muscle function, especially during cold acclimation. They orchestrate the longer-term adjustments.
And the other key switch, you mentioned an energy sensor.
Yes, AMP-activated protein kinase, or AMPK. This is like the cell's internal fuel gauge, or maybe its emergency energy manager. If temperatures get too high or too low, it can cause an energy deficit inside the cell, basically. The ratio of used energy, AMP, to available energy, ATP, gets out of balance.
Because of that mitochondrial inefficiency we talked about.
That's likely a major driver. When AMPK senses this energy stress, this low fuel state, it gets activated and triggers changes in local metabolism to try and restore balance or conserve energy. It's a direct response to the energetic consequences of the temperature stress.
We've gone from the whole ocean down to specific molecules like AMPK. Let's zoom back out now. The paper stresses that temperature doesn't act alone, right? What's the broader context?
Absolutely crucial point. Climate warming is happening alongside lots of other changes. One big one is trophic cascades. Think about predator-prey relationships. If a predator and its main prey species have different thermal tolerances or different abilities to shift their timing,
We get a mismatch, like the dinner bell rings but nobody's home, or the predator shows up too early or too late.
precisely, it disrupts the whole food web dynamic, even if each individual species in isolation seems okay with the temperature. It's about the interactions.
And temperature also interacts with other non-living factors.
Yes, synergistic effects. Warming often occurs alongside ocean acidification, or areas with low oxygen, known as hypoxia. And pollution is a big one. The paper specifically mentions bisphenol A, BPA, a common pollutant, which has been shown to actually reduce the thermal tolerance of fish.
So the heat makes them vulnerable, and the pollution makes them more vulnerable to the heat. It's a double whammy.
Or even a triple or quadruple whammy, depending on the location. These factors often compound each other's negative effects.
So given all this complexity, where does the research need to go next? What are the big unknowns?
The paper lays out 4 really critical areas for future work. First, understanding the interplay between those different types of plasticity, the short-term acclimation, the developmental effects, and that transgenerational influence. How do they interact within real fish stocks? We don't fully know.
Okay, untangling the different adaptation strategies. What's second?
Second, digging much deeper into those interactive effects between temperature and all the other stressors, acidification, hypoxia, pollutants. We need to understand the combined impact, not just temperature in isolation.
Right, the real-world cocktail of stressors. Third.
Third is mapping out those species interdependencies, the trophic dynamics under warming scenarios. How will food webs actually restructure? Which links will break?
And the final one ties back to the mitochondria.
It does. The fourth critical area is properly quantifying those changing inefficiencies in energy use, especially that mitochondrial proton leak, and building that mechanistic understanding of energy cost directly into our fisheries population models.
Because current models might be underestimating the true energy drain on these fish.
Potentially, yes, if we don't account for that increased cost of living at the cellular level, our predictions about fish stock, health, and productivity might be overly optimistic. That inefficiency could be a major, currently hidden driver of decline.
That's a really powerful concluding thought. This deep dive makes it crystal clear that understanding the nuts and bolts of fish physiology right down to the mitochondria isn't just academic, it's fundamental for predicting whether fisheries can remain viable in this warming world. The key takeaway for me is that it's not just about getting too hot. It's about this systemic breakdown in energy efficiency.
I agree completely. The ability of fish populations to persist really hinges on the integrity of that internal energy balance. And right now, it's under unprecedented pressure from multiple angles. It's an energy crisis at the biological level.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the physiology of warming waters.